We are officially less than 30 days to the NFL draft. So in this video, I want to do a first round mock draft with some trades of what I would do if I was the owner of every NFL team. Subscribe if you're new, let's hop into it. So again, in most of my mock drafts, I have been doing in some ways what I would do, but I have been mixing in what I think the team would also do with those videos. This video is specifically what I would do if I was the owner of every single team. So keep that in mind. There will be some trades in this one. We are going to begin with at pick number 1, the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans have really been kind of all over the board in free agency, but they really have not addressed probably their biggest need in the quarterback room. I don't know if I think Cam Ward is worthy of the number 1 overall pick, but Tennessee is in a position where it almost feels like they have to take a quarterback or else you're going to be rocking with Will Levis, and you do not want to do that. So I'm not going to overthink it. I'm going to take the highly talented playmaking guy in Cam Ward, who I do think could bring some energy to this Titans team that frankly could really use it. I will admit, I don't know if he's the greatest fit for the system they run in there, but if he can develop in there, then I do think eventually he will be a really good fit in this team. Again, big, physical, long, good arm, good athlete, good playmaker. Has some flaws to his game. I don't think he's necessarily the most accurate completely at all times. His fundamentals can be a little inconsistent, but I think give him a year of development and allow him to really flourish in a system here in Tennessee with some good players around him. We'll take Cam Ward number 1 overall. All right, so at number 2, the Cleveland Browns, and I think this is kind of where the draft truly does start. I feel like Cam Ward number 1 is probably what's going to happen. It's what I would do, and it feels like that's what ultimately the Tennessee Titans are going to do. But at pick 2, I've seen a lot of buzz about this Cleveland Browns team taking Abdul Carter, and I understand. I think Abdul Carter is a fantastic player. It's him and Travis Hunter are the 1A, 1B of this year's draft class. They're both blue chip prospects. But to be honest with you, I'm kind of surprised I have not heard more buzz about Travis Hunter going to the Cleveland Browns, because that's a position of need at both positions. They need cornerback help. They also need receiving help. They could use an opposite pass rusher to Myles Garrett, but you already have Myles freaking Garrett, so it's a little bit easier to shore up that edge rushing room when you have that guy in Myles Garrett. So even though I would love to take Abdul Carter, I'll pass on him here to take Travis Hunter, who can play both receiver and can play cornerback. I know you're going to ask, well, who's going to throw him the football? It's probably going to be Kenny Pickett, but they'll figure that out hopefully in 2026. We're going to take Travis Hunter here to play both sides, but probably play more receiver than corner. He'll probably just be in certain packages on defense. All right, the Giants are here at pick 3, and if I am the New York Giants, a team that really doesn't need a pass rusher, especially after they brought in Brian Burns, I think I might be willing to trade down here. Now, I'm not going to trade down to anything less than a top 10 pick, so I'm going to look at the rest of the board here and talk about which team could trade up. Would the Patriots trade up? Probably not. Would the Jacksonville Jaguars trade up? Probably not either. Maybe the Patriots would swap with them. I'd actually consider that, but probably not. They'll probably stay here and take tackle. Raiders, would they trade up? Maybe, but I'm going to say probably more than likely no. The Jets maybe would if they don't believe that Justin Fields could be their guy and they want to trade up for Shador. But if the Giants are calling about a trade, it's pretty clear they probably aren't taking Shador. So I'm going to assume the Jets are probably going to stay here at 7. But I think the conversation does begin with the Carolina Panthers. And if I am the Carolina Panthers, I would definitely consider trading up here. So I'm going to ultimately get a trade here with the Carolina Panthers, and it kind of worked out. They both perfectly lined up here. Obviously, there would be a pick swap. I think now the big question is it going to take another first round pick to move up, or could you get away with 8, 57, and I don't know, maybe like 114. Something along those lines. For the sake of this video, it does not matter because this is only a 1-round mock draft. With that said, we're going to punch this through right here, and the Carolina Panthers are going to be on the board, and you don't have to think twice about who I'm taking here. I'm going to take Abdul Carter. They've been aggressive in adding pieces to that team, re-signing J.C. Horn, Tershawn Horton, so many other really good players to add to this defense, and you get Derek Brown back next year, which is probably the biggest addition from this team, and getting Abdul Carter would be a complete difference maker for this defense. They need a go-to pass rusher. They need a guy. They need a stud. It's kind of unfortunate that they failed to pick 8, and they're probably going to have to be calling up teams to try to get Abdul Carter. But man, if the Panthers can take Abdul Carter, it just makes so much sense. For the New York Giants, yes, you could take Abdul Carter, but you already have Burns, you already have Kayvon, you already have Dexter Lawrence, so it would already be, a good defensive line room with or without Abdul Carter. For the Giants, you get extra draft capital, and you can take a player at pick 8 who's still a really good player, and I already know who they're probably going to end up taking. So we'll move on to the New England Patriots, who brought in Stephon Diggs, brought in Carlton Davis, added some help to the defensive line. If Abdul Carter is somehow available for them at pick 4, or Travis Hunter, you easily take him at 4. Unfortunately, the ball did not roll their way in this one, so they're going to go ahead and take an offensive lineman because they need to address that room quite badly. Both tackle, because Morgan Moses is kind of a ticking time bomb when it comes to injuries, or guard are also in play here. For me, I am higher on Will Campbell, but I'm also higher on Membu as a tackle. And because you're taking a pick at 4, I don't think you're drafting a guy to exclusively play guard at the NFL level at pick 4. You just don't take a guard in a top 5 pick unless he's like, I don't know, a complete freak show, like a future all-pro Hall of Famer type of guy, like a Zach Martin. And while I think Will Campbell could be that, I don't think that he's necessarily that surefire of a guy to take him at pick 4. So I'll take Armand Membu here, who I think has a better shot at sticking out at tackle, but he can play guard if they need him to. He's a good athlete, moves around quite well, had a great year for Missouri last year. His stock is on the rise, and for good reason. We'll take Armand Membu to be the New England Patriots' future tackle, or maybe even guard next year. All right, Jacksonville is here at pick 5, and gosh, this is just, to me, the Jaguars are one of the harder picks of the draft, because while I love Tetairoa McMillan, I think 5 is a little bit rich here. I love Mason Graham, and I would consider him here, but I think the Jaguars have other, maybe more dire needs on other positions, more so than interior defensive line, even though they could really use a guy like Mason Graham there. Genty's in play here for me. Tyler Warren is also in play here for me, even though I think Warren maybe at 5 is very rich, but I could see a team looking for an identity maker and trusting an all-in-one guy like Tyler Warren, so I do think it's in play. If I'm the Jacksonville Jaguars, I have a new offensive head coach, I have a new offensive philosophy, I need Trevor Lawrence to step up now. I need Trevor Lawrence to be the guy that we all think he can become. And what is the best way to make my quarterback more comfortable in an offense? Well, there's a couple things. One, a reliable target. You kind of already have that in Brian Thomas Jr. Would it be nice if you had another guy there? Yeah. Or a dominant ground game with a good offensive line. Granted, the offensive line for Jacksonville is not the greatest, but you're bringing in Patrick McCarry, which I like the pickup, so there's some movement there. And maybe you take Genty at pick 5, who I think of the players available, if I had a big board, I think Genty would probably be number 3. So yes, you have Travis Etienne. Yes, you have Tank Bigsby. Is running back your biggest of needs on your roster? No. Is this a deep running back class? Yes. But is there another guy like Ashton Genty for the Jacksonville Jaguars? I don't think so. I'm trying to talk myself out of it in my head, because I feel like Jaguars fans are going to rip my hair out, or rip their own hair out, I should say, if I take Ashton Genty. But man, I just look at the board here, and while I love Mason Graham, there are some concerns with his physical stature, warranted or unwarranted. There is some legitimate issues there. But Genty would be a difference maker for this offense. Like, Genty is of a similar prospect of Ezekiel Elliott in 2016, Saquon in 2018, 2017. So I'm going to take, I'm trying to talk myself out of it, but I think I've talked about it enough here. I'm going to take Ashton Genty. Screw it. We'll take Ashton Genty for the Jacksonville Jaguars. That would be the first time I've actually ever done that pick for Jacksonville in basically any mock draft I've ever done. So I'd be interested to hear what Jaguars fans would say about that. So let me know in the comments if you're a Jaguars fan. Now at 6, if you're the Raiders, your plans are a little bit messed up here, because you probably were going to go ahead and just take Genty at 6, but now he's off the board. So now you have to kind of consider other options here. Do you go with a guy like McMillan? Do you take the star and Mason Graham? Do you add to your offensive line and Will Campbell? I think those are all in play here. Do you even maybe look to trade down here? And would there be a team that would want to trade up? Would the Jets trade up? Probably not. They would probably stick here and just take the best player that's available, whether it's McMillan, Campbell, Graham, maybe even Johnny Barron. Probably not, though. Do the Giants move back up to pick 6 and take a guy like Mason Graham? Maybe. But at the same time, they're kind of in a similar spot to the Jets, where they can just sit here and take a, either one of McMillan, Graham, or Will Campbell. The Saints are a bit more interesting. They have a new head coach. Maybe they want to get a bit more aggressive and move up for Mason Graham. Just don't think they would ultimately do it. Would the Chicago Bears do it? Maybe. This is a team that feels like they could play a bit more aggressive this draft to surround this roster with the best overall talented players. And while interior defensive line isn't like a dire need for them by no means, man, if you can upgrade your interior defensive line by getting Mason Graham, I don't think you think too hard about it. So, I mean, again, this is what I would do. If I am the Bears, I would at least take a phone call and let's kind of just see what it would take. I don't think it would take, they have 2 second-round picks. I feel like Mason Graham addresses a big need for them, and you could just take running back at 39 or take whatever else you want to take. It wouldn't take a second first. It would be a pick swap and maybe, I don't know, would it take a 41? I think maybe it would take 41. It could even just be 72. But for the sake of conversation here, because they have 2 second-round picks, we'll do 10 and 41 for 6. We'll force the trade here, and we'll get this done. The Chicago Bears will move up here, and they're going to take Mason Graham. Again, maybe not the biggest need on this defense because they have some guys there. But if you can add a legitimate threat, a legitimate space eater, a physical, athletic, can move very well for his size. I mean, he's not huge. He's about, I don't know, 295, maybe plays at 300. Arm length is an issue, but I'm not too worried about it. He's so physical. He gets to the quarterback really well. He can eat up space. He's a disruptor. For Chicago, I mean, you're playing here with a little bit of luxury if you're Chicago because you have 3 picks in the top 41 picks, and you don't really have too many other needs. So I think you may look at potentially trading up to get a talented player like Mason Graham here. All right, the Jets are on the board at 7. Unfortunately, no Mason Graham, no Armand Membu, no Carter Hunter, obviously. So the Jets are probably just going to stick here and just probably take the best player of a positional need. And I think maybe they would consider Will Campbell here, but I think they might go with Tyler Warren. You look at the tight end room for the New York Jets, it's really not that good. Jeremy Ruckert, Stone Smart, Zach Kuntz, Neil Johnson. This team brought in a new quarterback in Justin Fields, a good way to give a young quarterback, or maybe not young at this point, but a growing quarterback, some help is by giving him a go-to target. Yes, T-Mac is available, and I would definitely consider him, but they have some options there at the bare minimum. Right now, their tight end room is barren. It's bad. This is a deeper tight end class, but I don't think it's incredibly deep. Like, I think once you get to past Warren and Loveland, you look at Arroyo, I don't think he's a great fit for the Jets. I like Mason Taylor, but I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of Harold Fannin. I don't love the way that he runs with the football in his hands. Terrence Ferguson, Gunnar Helm, so on and so forth. There's a lot of concerns and different yes, buts, with them. With Tyler Warren, I don't necessarily think he's the highest upside. He's not Brock Bowers, right? And if you're taking him at 7, feels a little rich here. But man, I just look at the board here. Will Campbell, I think, sticks inside to play guard, which the Jets maybe more need a tackle per se, which I think Campbell can do. I just worry about the arm length, and that's a legitimate issue with him. T-Mac has some really good ability. I like T-Mac as a player. I just think that tight end is maybe a bit more of a need for them. So we'll just take Tyler Warren here and give the Jets an all-in-one tight end to do multiple jobs for them. All right, the Giants moved down to pick 8, and the board fell kind of how I thought it would. They've been aggressive in addressing their secondary, so I don't think you necessarily need to go that part here. I think I'm just going to take Will Campbell. They could use help in both the tackle room and the interior of the offensive line. Jermaine Illuminor had a good year last year, but Andrew Thomas is always injured and remains a little bit older at this point, or I guess just another year older. The interior of your offensive line is older. It's also not very good. You've had question marks with both your guards and your center positions. Will Campbell kind of just fixes all those needs, and you got more draft capital by trading down with Carolina. All right, number 9, the New Orleans Saints are here, and I just think the New Orleans Saints just probably should go best player available in a position of need. And unfortunately, the board didn't fall too nicely for them, but Tetairoa McMillan is here. You do have Olave, who is just such a good player when healthy. It's just the concussion issue is very real with him. You also have, I always mess up his name, Rashid Shathi, something like that. I always mess up his name. I don't know why. I can never get it right. But T-Mac would be a guy who would give them a size element that they could really use, especially in an offense that with Kellen Moore had A.J. Brown the year prior. Don't really have that right now on the roster, so getting a guy like T-Mac could be that. Even though he's not a 50-50 ball winner, he can, but he's not really like that. He's oddly sized for a guy of his skill set, where he is incredible after the catch, more of a possession guy, but has legit size to dominate opposing corners. So I'm considering him here at 9. If Ashton Jeanty was here, I'd probably take him, but he's not. You brought back Chase Young, which felt like was a big time pickup for them, which somehow, some way, they still have money available. It's just crazy. Jahad Campbell could be a long-term play for him for this team to play linebacker, to also play a future edge. Demario Davis is a fantastic player, but he's getting older at this stage. So I would definitely consider Jahad Campbell, but I think I am going to go ahead and just take Tetairoa McMillan. It's a pick I've done before, and I just really like the pick here. It makes a lot of sense. You already have... Well, actually, I just looked at their depth chart. I forgot about Brandon Cooks, so that kind of puts a nail in that one probably. So I guess I'll just stick here and maybe just take cornerback or Jahad Campbell, because right now their cornerback room is not very good. You have some young options there and Kool-Aid McKinstry, but outside of that, I don't really love the options available. Jahdae Barron, I think, could play nickel, safety / corner for this team, could give them a lot of good play. Will Johnson could be more of that true outside corner to play opposite of Kool-Aid. But Jahad Campbell, I think, could be the long-term play. Yes, you have Pete Werner, and yes, Demario Davis is still playing at an incredibly high level, but Jahad can, work with Demario Davis. He can also be an incredibly great player for them when he's on the field. Could even play edge rusher for this team. Maybe that also leans me a bit more to Jalen Walker, who could be maybe a bit more of a higher upside pass rusher. And this team might need a more of a traditional pass rusher who could play off-ball linebacker too. So we'll actually change course here and go Jalen Walker here. I kind of was all over the board there, but you guys kind of see how I got there. All right, the Las Vegas Raiders are on the board here, and a couple of needs for this team. Number one, cornerback, receiver, running back. They're all big-time positions of need here. Amarion Hampton's on the board here, who I'm a big fan of, but at pick 10 could feel a little bit rich. Tetairoa McMillan is also on the board, who I think would be a good player for this team. Geno Smith needs some receiving threats, and T-Mac is on the board. Cornerback is also a need too. This team feels like they have a number of decent corners, but they really need a true CB1. Maybe you trust Will Johnson to be that guy if you just get away with some of the injury concerns. But again, you brought in Geno Smith. I think you have to go receiver here to give him as many options as possible. They really haven't done anything so far. So we'll take Tetairoa McMillan, who I'm a pretty big fan of. All right, San Francisco is on the board here, and they could use a number of things all over the roster, basically. But I think Jahdae Barron answers a number of questions in the secondary. You had a really solid young secondary draft last year. Renardo Green, Malik Mustafa, however you say his name. I had somebody in the comment section correct me on it, but I just blanked on his name, so my apologies. I think Jahdae Barron kind of finishes off that secondary in a nice way, so we'll take Jahdae Barron here. All right, moving on to pick 12 with the Dallas Cowboys. There's a lot of different ways they can go here at pick 12. I think running back is a big-time need. I've heard they're actually interested in Damian Martinez in the second round, which would feel a little high for me, but I can definitely understand why they would like him. I think he's a good player. Amarion Hampton is also on the board here, but I think this team needs a wide receiver opposite of CeeDee Lamb. And there's some options on the board here. I will say, I do want to, before I take this pick, I do want to just briefly look to see if there's any trade partners potentially available at this stage, because Jahad Campbell is here, Will Johnson's here, Malachi Starks is here. The Dolphins, I don't think would trade because they'd probably just sit pat and just take best player available. Colts probably have no reason to trade up because they don't really need any of the positions here. Maybe Jahad Campbell they could use. Atlanta, probably not. Cincinnati, would they trade up? I don't think so. So yeah, I'm not seeing too many. Maybe the Broncos to take Amarion Hampton, but if you're Dallas and you're not planning on taking Amarion Hampton, I don't feel like there'd be any reason for the Broncos to do so, because none of these teams are probably taking running back. So if you're Denver, it wouldn't make much sense to trade up. Pittsburgh is in potential play here. It would just completely depend on how Pittsburgh views Shador, or if they maybe just want to trade up to just snag Amarion Hampton away from the Denver Broncos. That could also be in play here. And if I am Dallas, trading down to 2021 does make some sense because they could use a number of things. I just wonder if there would be, would Pittsburgh realistically trade up at this stage to get Shador? Probably not, because none of these teams are taking Shador Sanders. They all have their quarterbacks of the future. So maybe besides the Colts, who have Anthony Richardson, but there's a lot of question marks there, but they're not taking Shador. So there wouldn't really be a reason for Pittsburgh to trade up unless they were wanting Amarion Hampton that badly, but they probably don't need to trade up for Amarion Hampton. So I'm not really seeing any realistic trade partners that would make sense for both sides to want to have a trade happen, which is unfortunate for Dallas. So in this spot, I don't think there would be a trade here because I just don't see any of these teams really wanting to trade up. So I'm going to just have the Dallas Cowboys taking the player that I was targeting here, and that was probably just going to be Matthew Golden. I know Amarion Hampton is maybe the better player, but I think Dallas has to play this one pretty smart here, where you need to take a receiver, and I just don't know if any of the receivers in round 2 are serious difference makers, maybe outside of Jaden Higgins, who I'm a very big fan of, who I think would be a nice fit with CeeDee Lamb. But I think you have to play it smart here because you need another outside receiver, and I don't know if Burden is that, I don't know if Mecca is that, but I do think Matthew Golden could be that. And the running back class is very deep, and you could just take one of these guys in round 2. So we'll maybe do a bit of a reach here on Matthew Golden, but I'm a huge fan of Matthew Golden. Maybe not the greatest size-wise. Great route runner, solid hands, just finds ways to get open. Ran a 4.29. Dallas could use that. They can use another option next to CeeDee Lamb. He's also decent with the ball in his hand, so we'll take Matthew Golden here for the Dallas Cowboys, back-to-back Texas Longhorns. And then there's the Miami Dolphins at pick 13. A lot of different ways they can go here. They could go Malachi Starks to add another guy in the safety room. They could go offensive line to protect Tua. They could go Will Johnson to pair him with Jalen Ramsey. A lot of ways to go here. Do I go with the 3 Texas players in a row with Kelvin Banks, who I'm a lot higher on than feels like everyone in the community? I think Kelvin Banks is a top 10 caliber player who just typically falls out of my top 10 because there's Will Campbell and Armand Membu going up boards higher. So he's definitely in play here. I don't know if he's the greatest scheme fit, though, for the spot here. Gray Zabel is also here, but this would feel a little high for him. And if Malachi Starks is on the board, I think you at least have to consider him here because while they did do some work with the safety room, like this, I mean, Ashton Davis starting for them next year is okay, but it can definitely be a position of upgrade. I'm not even going to say this guy's name. Afitu. I'm sorry. I don't know how to pronounce that. You know, Kader Kaho, Storm Duck, like this secondary could use an influx of talents. And man, Malachi Starks is available here, who I think can play multiple positions on a defense, could be that versatile option for the Miami Dolphins. I know offensive line might seem like a bigger need, but no Membu, no Will Campbell. Are you taking Kelvin Banks? Maybe. I just don't love the scheme fit. Josh Simmons is also kind of questionable because of his injury. And, you know, is he going to stick inside to play guard or tackle? All those are also in play, but I think that they would maybe consider passing on it here. But again, this is what I would personally do. And I just think Malachi Starks is a fantastic player that adds a lot to a defense. So we'll take Malachi Starks here to play free safety, strong safety, nickel. I even think he can play some cornerback, frankly. All right, the Colts are on the clock here. You lose what, EJ Speed? I believe that's his first name. Could be wrong, but you lose Speed at linebacker, and that definitely sucked. You also lost some interior offensive linemen, which also sucks. Will Fries is out the door. You also lose your centers, so some question marks there. I think I'm just going to go ahead and take Jahad Campbell, who I love Jahad Campbell. I think he's a fantastic player, excellent downhill thumper, can be a disruptor in the linebacking room. I think he's solid in coverage, still needs to kind of develop some skill sets there, but he has shown some good coverage ability here and there. Can also come off the edge and give you some pass rush elements as well. This would give another versatile piece to add to your defense and would be a big-time significant upgrade in this defense because they haven't had a dominant linebacker since I forget his name. The linebacker that was so good a few years ago had like a 2-year prime, and then kind of fell off a cliff after that. I can't remember his name for whatever reason. So we'll take Jahad Campbell here for the Indianapolis Colts. All right, the Atlanta Falcons are on the board here. Again, pass rush is just a dire need for them, and Mike Green is on the board here. So I think Mike Green is a high upside pass rusher who maybe needs to add a bit of weight, has some off the field concerns that have to get taken care of. But if those do get taken care of, I'm going to have Mike Green go into the Atlanta Falcons. Arizona's on the board here. I do think defensive line has been significantly upgraded by bringing in Josh Sweat, so I do think there is more flexibility for what this team could actually do at pick 16. And Will Johnson's on the board, who is falling off draft boards because of some injury concerns and inconsistent 2024 tape. But man, if you can get 2023 Will Johnson, that's a true cornerback 1 in the NFL. Good size, good range, has shown glimpses of being a dominant ball hawk and sticky in coverage, good in zone, smart player, just inconsistent at times, which you want to kind of hone in here. This is a Cardinals team that has a number of good corners, but not necessarily a true cornerback 1, like a lockdown, I'm going to cover your best guy type of guy, and Will Johnson could maybe become that guy. All right, the Cincinnati Bengals are on the clock here, and they need as much defensive help as possible. They also could use some offensive line help, but they could just really use, anything on the defense, frankly. They could just take best player defensively available. I think I'm just going to take Shamar Stewart. Now, Shamar is not a finished product by no means, but I think he would offer the Bengals some flexibility because of how big and gifted he is. And again, you're hopefully bringing back Trey Hendrickson. You need to find somebody opposite of him. This is a Bengals team that might be looking for a more win-now option. But I look on the board here, and I'm not the highest on James Pierce Jr., frankly. I think there's a lot of concerns with him. A little bit too underweight. Don't think he has the greatest pass rush tool set right now. Relies very much on his explosiveness, which just doesn't typically work in the NFL too much, which maybe a guy like James Pierce Jr., who has done it against SEC competition, could find a way to make it work. But then you also throw on top, there's some off-the-field concerns too. Donovan Ezaraku is a great player, but he's 247 pounds, and I just don't know if he's ever going to be dominant against the run. So I think you need a guy who can just kind of do a bit of both. And I think Shamar Stewart could do that. I'd also consider Mike Williams, but I think Shamar has a higher ceiling. So because this is a draft where I don't know if there's too many surefire, fantastic players day one, I might be willing to take a bit more of a project player who I think can develop into becoming somebody incredible. And that could very well end up being Shamar Stewart, who feels a bit more like a boomer bust player, but could be a great player if he does boom. All right, Seattle's on the board here. I think offensive line is their biggest need, whether it's interior or even tackle because of Abraham Lucas's health. So we'll take Kelvin Banks, who I think probably is better sticking at tackle, but I think he can play guard if you need him to. Next is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who I just think are in a good position roster-wise. They don't really have a ton of needs, but I think if you can upgrade your defense, I definitely do think you would do so. This team feels like it could use a true dominant pass rusher, like somebody who can just go in there, maybe not a 3-down guy, because they don't really need a 3-down guy, but just somebody who can be a true pass rusher. Yes, you brought in Hassan Reddick, but there are some questions there. I think I'm going to go ahead and just take Donovan Ezaraku, who, again, lightweight, don't really know how he's going to be against the run at the NFL level, but has proven productivity, 14 sacks last year, 18.2% pass rush win rate. Sorry about that. So yes, if it comes down to, is this guy going to be good against the run? Probably not. But I think this guy is a true dominant pass rusher that can come in on second and third downs, put pressure on a quarterback, and really just be that guy for this team. All right, the board is falling quite nicely here for the Denver Broncos, who need a running back, and Amari Hampton's on the board, so that's who I'm going to go ahead and take. No explanation needed. Amari Hampton's a great running back. Sean Payton works best when he has good running backs and good tight ends too, so they could have taken Colston Levin, but you took Evan Ingram already in free agency, so we'll take Amari Hampton there. All right, Pittsburgh's on the board here, and Shedeur Sanders fell right into their lap. Do I think Shedeur is worthy of a first-round pick? I tend to think he's probably better suited as like a post-20 spot guy, and that's kind of where he falls here. So I think it's a great spot for Pittsburgh to just sit here, take your quarterback of the future. Maybe you bring in Aaron Rodgers, maybe you don't. Either way, you have your quarterback of the future in Shedeur Sanders. Next is the LA Chargers, who had a interesting offseason. They made some good moves, but also I don't think they were as aggressive as they maybe should have been. With that said, in this draft, you have to find more weapons for Justin Herbert, and that could very well be Colston Loveland. I've done this pick before. I've explained it multiple times. It feels like the common pick for the Chargers, so we'll stick with that. All right, the Packers need help in a lot of different rooms, receivers, corners, edge rushers. They can kind of use, they're not desperately in need for any of those, but they definitely could use all those. I think Luther Burden sticks more as a slot and isn't a true wide receiver one. Same with the Emeka Egbuka. I just don't know if he's that true go-to guy. So I think you might wait, and I don't even know, maybe just pass on it altogether in the first round here because it's just not an incredible receiving class. I think maybe you look at adding a pass rusher, and I know I talked about James Pierce Jr. and all the concerns with him, but he does have proven productivity against the SEC, against some really good players. I could even go Michael Williams, who might have a safer floor than James Pierce Jr., but this does feel like a Packers team that really just needs to go all in and not play it too conservatively. And if you want to play it conservatively, I think you take Michael Williams, but I think if you want to play it aggressively, I think you take James Pierce Jr. So we're going to go ahead and take James Pierce Jr. here. All right, Minnesota's on the board here. I think there's a couple ways you can go here. You can go into your defensive line to add a big physical run stuffer like Kenneth Grant. You could also prepare for the future of Jordan Addison potentially leaving by taking Luther Burden, or you can maybe reach on a running back because of Aaron Jones' age and take a guy like Travion Henderson or Quinshon Judkins. So a number of ways we can go here, but I'm just going to go ahead and take the interior defensive lineman in Kenneth Grant. Yes, you brought in some names here who I think should play some good snaps for you, but I think you just need a true interior defensive lineman who is a great run stuffer and is also young and could be a long-term plan of your defensive line. So we'll take Kenneth Grant here. All right, Houston's in a position where they've addressed their offensive line, but not necessarily for the long term. They brought in a bunch of names who can play for a year or two, but they don't really have a younger offensive line. Yes, you have some pieces who you feel okay with, but I think you just need to find surefire guys who can move around and be long-term parts of your offensive line. And I think that leads me to Gray Zabel. Yes, I think Josh Simmons is a better prospect, but I think he's better and more likely to stick at tackle. Whereas for Gray Zabel, he kind of can be a movable piece across any spot on the offensive line, which I think Houston might be a bit more inclined to take here because they just could really use versatility on the offensive line. So we'll take Gray Zabel here, who I think will probably play guard and maybe could move out to tackle in the future. All right, the Rams are here at pick 26, and I mean, the roster is incredibly solid. They really do not have a ton of needs here. So they say their needs are tight end, tackle, linebacker, corner. I don't necessarily disagree with that. There's no tight ends here who I would take in round one. Maybe you target Mason Taylor in round two, so I don't think you take tight end. Tackle is a need, but it's not a huge need. So Josh Simmons is in play here for this spot. Cornerback 1 is in need, but I just don't know if there's any true cornerback 1s available. I like Azariah Thomas. I also like Trey Amos. So those guys are also in play. I'm not worried about the rankings on PFF. I think those are great players who could develop quite nicely. Man, this team is just so well put together. There's just not a ton of needs here. You brought back Alaric Jackson on a long-term deal, but maybe you feel like you want to find an upgrade for Rob Havenstein or maybe a long-term play there, because Rob is 32 years old, probably in the back end of his career at this point. So I guess I'll take Josh Simmons, who I think also does give you some flexibility. Again, I think he's more of a true tackle, but I think he can play guard if you need him to. So maybe more of a depth option early on, but as injuries pile up, he'll get some playing time and eventually will be the long-term play at tackle for them. All right, the Ravens are on the board here, and man, I mean, Luther Burden's here. I know you already have Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, you brought in DeAndre Hopkins. Micah Williams is also here, who feels like he should be off the board by now. He's a game changer for a lot of teams. A lot of different ways they can go here, but I'll just take Micah Williams. They could use another disruptor in the defensive line, a guy who can get some pass rush reps. I don't think Michael is the highest ceiling guy because I think he's a little bit limited as a pass rusher, but I do think his floor is incredibly high because of how good he is against the run. And I think he has a level of ceiling as a pass rusher that could potentially be met. So we'll have to wait and see on that. But we'll take Michael to the Baltimore Ravens, which then leads me to the Detroit Lions, who says receiver is a need, but you have Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams. I feel like they need more of a downfield threat who can win 50-50 balls, and that's not what you're getting with these guys. So maybe you target, I don't know, an Alec Amanor, a Jaden Higgins, maybe a Trey Harris in rounds 2 or 3. I just think adding more defensive pieces on the defensive line, again, you're trusting Aiden Hutchinson to come back from his injury 100%. But I think adding a guy like Walter Nolan, who PFF compares to Milton Williams, I think would give this defense something they don't really have right now, which is somebody who could be good against the run while also has the potential for being a 3-down guy. I also think he has some flexibility around the defensive line, so we'll take Walter Nolan here for the Detroit Lions. I know there's some character concerns, but the Detroit Lions are a team that has really good character, really good culture, so they can kind of take on somebody, kind of like what Philadelphia did with Jalen Carter. All right, Washington is here, and they've been aggressive in addressing the receiving core, but I wouldn't say it's out of the possibility of taking Luther Burden here to, pair with McLaurin and pair with Debo. Even Emeka Egbuka is also in play. Do even want to throw out a shout out to some of the running backs here, because this offense feels like it could really use a true nether option next to Brian Robinson. And maybe that could get me to Travion Henderson, who has some injury history, but very explosive athlete, good contact balance, good feet, fast, athletic. This is an interesting spot here. I think I'm going to go ahead and take Emeka Egbuka because I think he's smart. I think he'd love to play with Jaden Daniels. I think he'd be a great fit next to Jaden Daniels. And Debo can be a bit more of your gadget guy. Terry McLaurin can be Terry McLaurin, and Emeka can play a bit more in the slot. Yes, you have Luke McCaffrey, but I'm not too confident in him. So we'll take Emeka Egbuka here. All right, Buffalo's on the board here. I just think adding more disruptors up the middle of your defensive line, maybe more of a true run stuffer who also can give some disruption. So win now team. Darius Alexander's a win now player, older prospect. He's 25 when he becomes a rookie. 4 sacks last year, good against the run. So we'll take Darius Alexander here. So yeah, I think that's a good pick. All right, Kansas City is on the board here. They have been a roster that feels like it's not as good as it should be, right? But you still have Mahomes, you still have Kelsey, you still have options there. I don't think you go Luther Burden. I think you maybe just continue to add pieces to your defensive line. This is not a bad team by no means. I feel like I kind of came off a little bit like this team sucks. Like, no, they were in the Super Bowl last year. They're a great team, but they lost some pieces, and you got to find a way to replace those guys. And the defensive line last year wasn't particularly great, so maybe you consider that. I also think running backs also in play here too. Isaiah Pacheco's injury is extremely concerning, and you don't really have too many other options outside of that. So I think I might pivot here and take running back because I feel like this team is so much better when they have a good ground game. Again, you have Pacheco, who you're hoping can come back next year and give you some good play. But maybe you take Travion Henderson or Quinshad Judkins here. I just think maybe you can take interior defensive line or just defensive line in general in like round 2. So yeah, we'll do something different here for the Chiefs and take running back. That would be fun. I mean, this, again, like I said, Mahomes works best when he can, run play action, have a good dominant ground game. And again, Pacheco's injury last year really hurt this team. So we'll take Quinshad Judkins here, who I think could be a first-round pick. And then lastly, the Philadelphia Eagles go best player available basically every single year, and every year it works out, and Luther Burden falls right into their laps. I mean, you pair him with AJ Brown, you pair him with Devontae Smith, kind of is like a match made in heaven because Luther Burden can play more in the slot while also playing on the outside. And I mean, my God, Jalen Hurts just gets so much help, and it's going to continue here with Luther Burden here. But this is my what I would do first round mock draft. You guys let me know in the comment section below, which picks do you agree with, which picks do you disagree with, and if you enjoy, hit the like and subscribe button. Love you guys. Peace.